Member for Fisher.
Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Urban Infrastructure. Will the minister explain to the House the importance of restoring the rule of law to construction sites, ensuring hard-working Australians are getting value for money on major infrastructure projects? Is the minister aware of how these benefits might be threatened?
The Minister for Urban Infrastructure.
Well, I do thank the member for Fisher for his question. Of course, he brings enormous and relevant experience to this chamber as not only a former barrister but as a former builder. And he is absolutely right to ask about the rule of law on construction sites, Mr Speaker, because in 2016-17 the Commonwealth Government will invest some $9 billion on transport infrastructure, and we are determined to get value for money on behalf of taxpayers. Now, unfortunately, the construction sector is marked by aggressive union activity, and as Master Builders Queensland has noted, a unionised worksite can add up to 30% of the cost of construction, and that's what comes from thuggery and criminality and corruption on building sites. Tricks like sudden walk-offs in the middle of concrete pours that the CFMEU is so fond of, Mr Speaker. That is why it is so important to re-establish the Australian Building and Construction Commission and the rule of law on building sites. But I'm asked if there is any threat to this approach, and it turns out, Mr Speaker, that there are some in this place who take a different view to the coalition about the role of unions on major infrastructure programs, who are happy, in fact, for dodgy union officials to get whatever they can out of the companies building the projects. Let me quote from the Trade Union Royal Commission, which describes the approach of one union on the Eastlink Tunnel project in Melbourne. In 2005, there was an agreement to pay $100,000 a year to that union by Tees John Holland, disguised by false invoices. And let me quote, "The genesis of the agreement was a proposal by Mr X." I say Mr X, Mr Speaker, in deference to your rulings, a proposal by Mr X to Stephen Sass in late 2004 that the joint venture provide financial support to the AWU in relation to the dedication of an organiser of the project. Now, the report also says that a Mr Caesar Mellum, who we can think of as Mr X's little mate, assumed primary conduct of the negotiation. And the case study gives us an approach into the principles followed by Mr X, by Caesar Mellum and by all of the gang at the AWU, the CFMEU and all of those other unions. We might call it the render unto Caesar what is Caesar's principle, because that is really the approach. When you look at the evidence given on oath, it seems that Mr X and Caesar and all the gang took a very expansive view of what is Caesar's. Clean Event, where Caesar and Mr X and the gang picked up $25,000 a year. ACI, 3 instalments of $160,000. Chiquita Mushrooms, and of course Caesar felt that what should be rendered unto Caesar was to be appointed as a Labor member of the Victorian Upper House. Who was it who was named first on his nomination form? It was, of course, Mr X, our old friend, the Leader of the Opposition.